Hello everyone and welcome to the Activist Lawyer Podcast. My name is Sarah Henry and I'm your host to this podcast, which offers a platform for lawyers to share their story and their journey into law and activism. Our guests will discuss the challenges and highlights of their work as well as important cases, opinions on legal and political matters, and will offer up advice and tips for anyone interested in pursuing a career in human rights law, public interest law or criminal justice. The Activist Lawyer Podcast is brought to you by the Granite Podcast Studio. Thank you so much for listening. Today we are exploring a topic that's incredibly important yet often overlooked, the state of mental health in the legal profession. This is something that we plan to keep bringing up regularly on the show, especially as we chat with guests, whether they're barristers or solicitors. It's a conversation that we think needs to be heard, and we are interested in feedback and experiences on a global level. I'm delighted to be joined by my Activist Lawyer Podcast co-founder, Jonathan McKeown.
Good morning, Sarah. How are you doing?
Good morning, Jonathan. Thanks for joining you. You're not a stranger to the studio. Well, you've been here
several times.
Yeah. So yes, a little bit different today. I think it's good to cover this topic, though. You and I have chatted about it before, and it's a very pressing issue.
Well, I think, certainly it's become obviously an increasing topic of discussion, and I think that what's useful is to have, I suppose, a bit more of an in-depth talk about it, because I think people are so busy, you only hear headlines and you don't then actually delve deeper to understand the issues for people.
And you don't have the time. Well, just before we get into that, a little bit of a refresher, maybe, about your journey into law. It's been a while since you were here as the interviewee. You were here as an interviewer. That was a long time ago. Recently.
Yep.
So maybe just remind us about your own path.
Well, it's going to sound a bit strange, but I always wanted to be a lawyer when I was growing up. But whenever I was a teenager, I had an interest in aviation, and we had a short-lived attempt at trying to fly model airplanes, myself and my father, which usually involved the plane going up and then crashing and then having to spend 3 months being repaired. And it led to an unfortunate nickname when I was at school because I was just going into secondary school or high school at the time. So I was in a whole new raft of people, and of course, if you said you flew model airplanes, that was a mocking opportunity. And so I was Biggles for about 4 years, which wasn't very flattering.
No.
So, but I never had the grades for law, which is really the honest situation. So I ended up doing an aeronautical engineering degree. And then after that, I went to America for a year as part of the training and employment agency, as it was then, had set up a scheme, the Business Education Initiative, to have people from non-business related degrees learn some business skills. So I went to America in that year and I studied business and law and accounts and karate and outdoor survival and kayaking. Wow. You know, the things that all are natural things that would all happen together. And during that year away, I thought, you know what, the law is more interesting to me. The aviation's fine, but I don't really want to go and become an engineer. I'd rather do law. And at that time, if you had a law degree, you could get into what was a bachelor's degree over 2 years. Although I did 3 years part-time in law, which at Queen's, covering the basic modules that you needed to cover to qualify for the institute. I managed to get into the institute, and then was the issue of then trying to find a master. When you're an apprentice, and my father had set up a business at the time which was dealing with car accidents and things like that, and even though I was applying for other firms, the solicitor that was helping him at the time said, well, you just come in here, so you know about this type of stuff, so you're an ideal for this, so come on. So I did that. And having done that for my apprenticeship and enjoyed it, I went on to another firm after I finished my apprenticeship, doing exactly the same thing, when I actually had wanted to go and do corporate law and be Ali McBeal and John Cage, is that what he's called? You know, I don't think I'm quite as much of a buffoon as John now, but that was the inspirations at the time. But the reality was that when I was applying for those jobs, I suppose I didn't have the background and experience, and so those opportunities weren't offered to me. So then I worked in another firm doing the same thing, the car accidents and that. And so at that point, as soon as I could get out on my own and have my own destiny, then I said, okay, well, I better get on and do that as quickly as possible, which I did in 2003. And I set up in Newry with this idea that I would have this, sideline of car accidents, and have a much bigger business dealing with probates and conveyancing and matrimonial, and hopefully get into the corporate space as well. But what I had underestimated was, I underestimated really just how hard it is to run a business for a start. And the other thing is about experience and background and people having trust in you, and I think perhaps the only thing that I could be trusted to deal with was car accidents. And I think what happened after a number of years was we said, look, nobody's trusting us to do these other things, so we'd better sort ourselves out and just become experts at what we do know. So that was probably after about 5 years of setting up the business, 5-6 years, and we were in the credit crunch era, that we decided, okay, well, this is what we better do now. I had, it'll come on to something we'll talk about later, but I mean, I did have the desire on many occasions to get out of what I had done, in terms of I've set up this practice and it's all going to be great, and sure, that's what other people do and it's all fine. And of course discovered that wasn't the way of it at all. And at one stage I did go away for a weekend to down south to do a pilot training pre-assessment with the thought of, I'll just leave the practice and I'll go and become a pilot. And I'll use my engineering degree after all. So that's what where we got the grounding, and we just said, okay, we'll just stick at this. And then we decided to concentrate the business then as JMK solicitors from 2001 onwards in the road traffic accident, personal injury space, just become the leaders of that, and that is what has happened in the last 15 years. But alongside that, then I have a number of other little ventures and things that, and we'll come to talk about those later on. But that's where that the business came about, and I think in terms of this project here with activists, that was meeting yourself and seeing what was going on in the world and having a frustration about, we all know it's the age-old thing. It's easy to throw the lawyers under the bus and and think that they're the problem, and really we are in most cases the solution for people to make sure that they get their rights, but they're always told that we're the bad guys. Don't trust them. When it's the person telling you not to trust us is who you should be worried about. So that's kind of where the background came in terms of, or where I am in terms of business, and in terms of this this project with activists, which we talked about recently with yourself. The 100th episode, and delighted about how it's going. And as you said, the discussion over the years has been in your podcast interviews with people, but also ourselves talking about mental health and those sorts of problems, and that's kind of where we wanted to have this discussion today, more focused on that.
Exactly. And the podcast has given us a great opportunity to kind of see the personal side of solicitors and barristers. We often see, their work and we follow their cases, but it's been a great opportunity to see, a little glimpse of how they maybe, have experienced, mental health or issues in terms of trying to balance their work, etc., which we'll get to as well. But you and I, as you said, have had several conversations over months now, many months, about mental health and well-being in general and how it relates to people working in the law. So this is why, yes, we're opening up to listeners as well to really feed into this conversation too. But why maybe specifically do you think this is an important topic at the moment for us to discuss?
Well, the latest thing that's made me think that it's extremely important is there's a bit more of a discussion in recent years about autism and ADHD and Asperger's to a lesser degree, but all is interrelated in that. And particularly post-pandemic, when you're seeing lots of people who are leaving the work environment, not just solicitors, but this quiet quitting and this this early retirement a lot of people took in the last 5 years, and I think you can start to see to a degree now a bit of a campaign starting to undermine people who are recognising that they might have issues that they didn't appreciate before, and ADHD might be a good example. Because it's not that everybody has extreme versions of autism or ADHD, but as we all know, it's a spectrum. There's different levels of it, and it might be that it's not that it's not something that is debilitating to the degree or that it needs, that you need treatment or medication or that. But I think because you're sort of seeing it undermined, and to me, I'm thinking, well, there's a big empathy position disappearing there, because we all need to have empathy for other people and trying to understand them. And you mentioned it earlier about we're all too busy these days, and that's kind of, that makes it easy to forget to be empathetic. And I think that's where, it's a big, important topic to me. I have had my struggles over the years, and, I've talked about them before, and I'm quite open about them. And I suppose in an environment where, as solicitors, you're always told, okay, got to be professional. You're not supposed to get personal. You're supposed to not be vulnerable. I think there's a balance between that, between saying, look, I'm struggling, but I'm still going to be the best lawyer you've got. It doesn't mean that you should have any doubts about my ability to represent you. It's a quote that I regularly tell people is Porrigo Murray, when he was on the podcast, saying about taking things personally, and you've got to be personally interested in it. I think that's the thing where it's you can take it personal, but still be professional. And I think that's kind of where over the years I would sort of see in myself that I have at times strayed over that in my desire to fight legal points and to to push for changes in legislation or the law. And I suppose it's in terms of trying to say, look, there are different streams of this. There's different different levels of people's mental health. Some people just are having a bad day and they just want to vent. Other people need more support, and that they shouldn't give up. It's having people around you that care about you and want to keep you on the straight and narrow, which is great. But I think it's because there's, I suppose, back to again what we're saying is there's a lot of headlines, a lot of misinformation that can come from that. So I suppose this is kind of more personal. Let's talk a little bit deeper about even my own problems and how I dealt with them well and mostly badly. And so you can still come through, and you can still be productive, but you've got to get help if you're in that position. It's
not easy. And you've mentioned a few different levels there, and obviously, somebody might have a bad day, and there's different, kind of levels of mental health that will present in any workplace, in any organisation. But one term that has come up quite a lot recently is burnout, and this culture of burnout. And I'm interested in getting your thoughts on that, because I feel like I've experienced that at one or two points throughout my career in law. And not because of anything in particular, I couldn't pinpoint it on something, but it's that feeling of severe overwhelm. And it could be a matter of you're juggling, stuff outside of work with your current workload, for example. It could be anything contributing to that. But you do see it being addressed a lot more from HR firms, for example, who are looking at this a little bit more closely. But I've seen some reports that it seems to arise very often within the legal profession.
I think for myself, I have to, I suppose, admit pretty that over the years, even from maybe teenage years, I would have had, issues with, I suppose, with depression and things like that without even realising that that's what it was. And I suppose, ironic in terms of, or coincidental, depending on your view, that I had a car accident when I was about 18. I was a rear seat passenger, and what I know from that, which was never really covered in whenever I did have a compensation claim arising out of it, and when I look back, I didn't see the psychological problems that were caused by that, and how they developed was it started off as poor sleep, and when I was at university, I probably slept most of the first 18 months. I remember regularly a friend coming to see was I going for breakfast, and then coming back at 5 o'clock, seeing was I going for dinner, and I'll get up for dinner, but I'd slept all day. I don't know if that was maybe an early stage of the burnout situation, about how these things happen. But so even though I would accept that I have a deep-seated, thing, I was susceptible to to having depression. I think that I didn't see it at the time, didn't understand that that's what was going on. And when I went to America for the year, I was in a much better routine, and I lost weight, and I didn't drink so much as a student. You would be, I think, ironic that your students just drink all the time, but I didn't, and I got into a good routine, and that was better. Yeah. So that made the working life a little bit better. I still wasn't great at the timekeeping, but when I was focused on something, I could get it done, and I would I would believe that I'd do it well. And the problem then became in the business that over the years, there became just more and more things to do, and then you were because you were just firefighting everything, you didn't really appreciate what was happening. You were just saying, "Oh, I'll get this thing done now. Okay, that's urgent. I'll get that done now. I'll get that done. I'll get that done. Okay, I'll do that tonight. I'll do that tomorrow," and without even realizing it, you get into a situation where you are spinning so many plates and you don't have a time to take a breath. And so over the years, this stuff just starts to pile on you, and you just don't see you don't see it happening until it's too late. Whenever you're someone that's susceptible to the burnout, and I remember one of the days where we were having a bit of a bad time in around 2011, something like that. We'd put in a new computer system, and I was totally frustrated about how it was going, and I decided to take the morning off to clear my head, and I went for a drive, and ended up in Downpatrick of all places, and I got to the car park at Downpatrick thinking I might go to the court or the little museum there, and I got a phone call to say the bookkeeper's just quit, and what? The bookkeeper's quit? Yeah, she can't cope with the new computer system, and she's fed up and she's gone. And I said, oh my God, right, okay, I'm coming straight back. And it was kind of like that jolt to get back. You do need some kind of a jolt when you're in that burnout phase. Because if you don't, you'll just continue to be burnt out and to get into worse and worse situations. And so I think we've had that over the years in the business that, and it isn't just me, of course, there's a big team of people now in JMK, and you can see that at various times over the years, various people have had burnout, and we haven't appreciated it or fully understood it, because back to what I said earlier is you think of it as a word just, burnout, of course, burnout. Yeah. So go for a week's holiday and come back and be not burned out.
That's it.
But when you are burned out, that isn't possible.
No.
And I think in around 2014, when we were getting, we'd come through all of those other problems that we had, and I was into burnout phase again, and that's when I first started taking antidepressants. At that point, in around 2014, I remember going to see a social worker in Daisy Hill Hospital, and obviously you have a bit of what's the word? You're nervous about going into the local hospital, into the the mental health department, and who's going to see you and otherwise, there wasn't anybody that I saw in the waiting room wise, although I did know one of the psychiatrists, and of course when I'm sitting in the waiting room, he's shouting over, "Well, Jonathan, how are you getting on?" And you're thinking, shh.
I know,
But yes, no, the social worker was quite nice. It wasn't any formal counselling or anything. It's just I went up to see her every month just as a wee check-in while I was taking the antidepressants, and back in to see the GP, and just said, okay, well, that's, there's just, stick it, just keep taking those and hopefully your things will settle down. And they did eventually settle down, but I do think that it was, I suppose, a start of a burnout. And actually, in hindsight, I wasn't totally burnt out, but I had that overwhelmed feeling, and I think this is where what happens is that if you keep going through stages where you're getting to the brink of the burnout, pull back, you end up without curing what's causing the burnout to happen, then you will just be back there on a cycle, and that's kind of what has happened to me over the years. Yeah. And I can see that at various times over the last number of years. That has happened where I never truly fixed what was causing my burnout, and therefore I was susceptible to it all the time.
Yeah, And even when you say there, you need a jolt to get back out of the burnout, as you said, if it's going to be a kind of cyclical thing, that doesn't solve the problem. It gets you back into the space for a little while, and then
I think it's the pressure. Again. I think hopefully the listeners can see that or know that themselves. Is that if you have if you have a day off, that's grand. But you go back in the next day because you think, well, I need to go back in because that's going to be urgent, and if I leave it for another 3 days, it'll become even more urgent. So I got to get in and do it. When actually you need to take a big step out to say, look, what's causing burnout? What's causing you to feel that way? Stop that, and then you'll be better organised at how you manage it. And that's why I talked before about how it's great to hear so many stories on this about people who have that and have got that right.
And you feel that you're not alone, because I think very often when something like that happens to you, you don't really want to share that it's happening. Also, you're too busy to talk about it because you're spinning so many plates. You don't have the actual time to sit down and start to think about what's happening with you, especially if you've family, different things happening outside of work. But as you said, it just builds and builds and builds until you ultimately do burn out, which is overwhelming.
Well, I think that is the thing, especially if you're the owner of a business. And I suppose I'm kind of lucky in that I had the ownership of JMK is shared now, and that has helped in terms of having another reliable leader who doesn't or who doesn't have our leaders who don't have my lack of ability of managing burnout. Probably everybody is susceptible to it.
Yeah.
The level of burnout on everybody in the team has been. I think we're certainly in the last 12 months been very close to the edge for everybody, because it has just been continuing to be relentless trying to run a business in a tough environment.
Yeah.
And I think the issue for me is that I'm more open about my problems, and you do need to be reminded, well, okay, there's a limit to how much you can share with people without them thinking you're not the person I want to be following. And that's kind of where you're at, is struggling with that, because you're thinking, well, I want to show that I am a human being.
Yes.
If that yes, I'm having a bad day, but I'm still the right person to guide it.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where you get back to balance in these things. Is people say, show you're vulnerable, but if you're the leader and people think you're vulnerable, well then do you maybe I should work somewhere else, so you've kind of always got that going on in your head.
Yeah.
And my thought is, well, if I'm open about how vulnerable I am, then you should trust me better, because you know that I'm not going to give you a whole load of fluff just to get you to do more work.
Yeah, and it's encouraging for anybody else who's feeling, in any way that their mental health is being impacted to look to leaders who are vulnerable in any industry. But of course, focusing back on the legal profession, you mentioned it a little bit at the start, but do you think there are specific barriers to people within our profession in terms of reporting mental health issues or bringing up issues in relation to their well-being? Is it specific?
Well, I think it's quite natural for people to be fearful about sharing what their struggles are, because it's where it goes beyond that. If you've got a struggle, the question is, where does that impact on, if you're a solicitor or a barrister and you're looking after clients, where does your mental health impact on your ability to provide the service that those people need? And I think it is entirely possible to have excellent client care and look after people and get them fantastic results and still be struggling.
Yeah.
But I think people would have this fear of, well, if people think that I'm a little bit erratic, maybe they wouldn't want to instruct me to look after them, and maybe the regulator wouldn't want you to be looking after people if you were susceptible to problems. But I think it's acknowledging that everybody has problems from time to time, and there is this thing in the law about characters. People are afraid to show that they are a character, because then it'll be, they're strange. You wouldn't want to. You wouldn't want them looking after you. They look how strange they are. But when I went into a solicitor in Belfast recently to have a chat about something, and it was a nice summer's day, and he was in his Bermuda shorts and Hawaiian shirt, wearing flip-flops, And I just thought, fair play to you, because I'm here sweating in my suit and tie.
Keeping up appearances.
So, but he was, you think who's right, who's wrong? He's right.
Yeah.
He's right because he's comfortable.
Well, I hope to see you coming in your Hawaiian shirt and flip-flops very soon. That's what I look forward to. Well, keeping on that topic in terms of support, mental health is discussed frequently. It's obviously a HR issue very much, and every company and firm will direct people to wherever the support is within their organisation. But within the legal profession, I know there's various new kind of functions set up, like law care, and there's various other ones in the UK. But in terms of the regulatory body and the support for solicitors in general out there, what's your perspective in terms of...
Well, I think everybody knows that myself and the regulator do not have a very good working relationship. And that's probably where I could admit some of my poor behaviours in terms of lashing out. Sometimes people will know that, say that we've had a very high profile disciplinary investigation over the last 10 years. And that had a lot to do with my mental health struggles. And I don't think that the regulator is equipped to deal with, with these issues properly, because the local regulator has a dual function of representing solicitors as well as disciplining them, and I don't think that you can be the disciplinarian and also then truly help people. And I think that the signposting idea of there's law care, if you're struggling, go to law care. To me that actually whenever I would say to them, look, this 10-year disciplinary thing is really affecting my mental health. Can we get it dealt with quickly? And they would say, "We'll just go to law care." And I said, well, that's not the issue. Can you not just get this dealt with? And it'll be strange to people, but we actually we issued injunction proceedings to force the disciplinary hearing on, because we knew it was nonsense, and but it was having such an impact on us, and everybody, I suppose, will in the local profession certainly will know that we were successful at having or I should say the regulator was unsuccessful, not only in their prosecution but in their appeal of the prosecution, and I think the issue there is you've got somebody who knew very well that it was having a detrimental impact on me and my colleagues, and I don't want to make this all about me, because my colleagues did struggle too, but they're able to speak for themselves, of course, so for me, one of the thing is that you think, well, I understand that they have a job to do in the regulator, but if they're professing to represent members, well, then they need to have a better structure for how they actually look after people, and how they, I suppose, that they square the circle of how they are the poacher and the gamekeeper, if you like. So I do think that they are ill-equipped, because they can't reconcile that conflict of interest that they have on that. And they have a very, very important job to do. The regulation of solicitors is a vitally important thing. You can't have rogues in the industry. You can't have people who are going to steal money. You can't have people who are going to be involved in poor practices. So they have got a very difficult job. But if your job is to actually help those people as well as discipline them, I don't see how that's easy to do. And telling someone to go to law care doesn't to me doesn't answer the question, or it doesn't answer the issue. I think we have a very comprehensive medical insurance for our staff, which has employee assistance helplines and has counselling and things like that. But we're in the same situation with our own staff, which is you can tell them to go, but you don't want to force them to go, because you don't want them to feel that you're prying into their personal circumstances, and that would get out. You're saying to them, look, we know how we know that people will be struggling, so please get the help. It's there, it's paid for, get it. But very often people will not want to do that, or won't want to take that step. And so as much as I have had my issues with the regulator, I have a lot of empathy for their position, and and I mean, people will doubt that, but that is true. I do have empathy for the position. I still don't like it, but it's the same. It allows me to then think of my own staff situation and saying, look, we might, if we see someone struggling, we got to help. We got to try and maybe push them into the right support, because just signposting isn't enough.
Yeah,
and it's having friends, having people around you who care about you, and you're saying, look, you're in trouble. You need to get this help.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where the where I got to last year in relation to to our, I say, high profile disciplinary matter, that it didn't matter that we were successful, because at the end of it we were exhausted.
I know. And
that's the thing. And I think that I think there's two incidences where in the first hearing in the disciplinary tribunal, that I looked over at one of my partners, and I just thought, this is awful. The worst thing that can happen to you in your legal career is being in a disciplinary process and before a tribunal. And I felt the guilt of, if they weren't with me, they wouldn't be here. And that was a terrible situation. I just felt the guilt of that, and we spoke afterwards, and they said, "Look, don't worry about it. I mean, we're a team. We're here together. We know we're right." But I did struggle with that, and then when the judgment of the tribunal came out, and it was totally in our favour, the three of us, who were the directors of the business at the time, we all shed lots of tears. And again, it does seem a strange thing. You've got three people who are, I'm not trying to blow our own trumpets, but leaders of our profession, leaders of a pretty big business, and the three of us are sitting in court crying. I mean, it is. I suppose it's great in a way of that it reminds you of what it's like for clients who go through this, because when you're the solicitor, you don't necessarily, you don't necessarily think all the time about how it might be for them. And this was one of those occasions where for us it was our first time in a tribunal. We may have been in a regular civil court lots of times, but not before the tribunal. So that was an emotional time. And then whenever then the regulator immediately appealed the decision, we were into another 3-4 months of struggle, and I think that's kind of where, by the end, when we had our successful, we were successful in their appeal, the society was unsuccessful in its appeal. I think that caused a lot of a lot of burnout for me. A lot of that was like a final catalyst. So last autumn was a very, very distressing time for me, and it was. I suppose it was having the wake up call of, right, this is you're in an incredibly low place here now. You gotta sort that out. You gotta sort it out, and it was not something that's going to get sorted out overnight. It's not something that a weekend away is going to sort. No. And that's kind of where we're at, and I can see myself where I'm a different person now. After all of that, after the last 5 years or 10 years, really, but that has been a real change in me, and it's not necessarily a change that I like. I kind of want to get back to the more relaxed person. What do you call it? Not going to pick up making model airplanes again just yet. I don't think, but
not yet. Well, I mean, undoubtedly that experience would take a lot out of anybody, and especially, somebody who, like yourself, you are a very empathetic person, and you're noticing what's going on around you as well in terms of looking after so many people and spinning so many plates and firefighting, as you said, and then to have that on top of everything is undoubtedly very, very stressful. You've spoken there about specific actions, and we've, that you could be referred to law care, for example, if you're suffering. But I'm wondering, in terms of creating a more sustainable model of working in law in a general sense, what could that look like in from your perspective in terms of providing that support and making people feel, I suppose, safe at work and that they can talk to somebody? Is it a case of maybe flexible working or being a little bit more adaptive to?
Well, I think, I always make this joke I tell this joke, which it hasn't aged well, unfortunately, because of technology. But, and if nobody laughs, that's why. Part of why, or it's probably it's too complicated the joke to understand. But it's the joke about the two American travellers they've hired a car out of Dublin and they're trying to get around, and they've got their map of Ireland, trying to work out the best way to get somewhere, and they stop a passerby and ask for directions, and the passerby says, "Well, if I was going there, I wouldn't start from here." Which isn't very helpful, but I think that's kind of where we're at in the law and in a lot of situations, is that how you fix it is not going to be fixed by it's not going to be fixed by tweaks to an existing system. You need the clean slate and start, and that's extremely difficult to do. A similar thing is one of the medical consultants who works in A&E that we deal with had said that he thought he could fix the process issues in the A&E department if he could close it for a week. It's just not going to happen. So this is the problem. What do you do? So from our perspective at JMK, we do have flexible working. We have home working. We had home working before the pandemic, and people used to laugh at us on snow days because they'd say, "Oh, you're so generous to your staff on a snow day. Or a bad storm, you let them. You give them the day off." And I says, "What makes you think we give them the day off?" I said, "But it goes up on your website that the offices are closed." I says, "Yeah, the offices are closed, but everybody's got home working equipment. They're all at home, so we're the worst boss." If you think that, it's kind of like, so we were always, I suppose, well ahead of that in understanding that these things happened, and like, for example, with court, I remember when I was going to court, if your court ended even at 12:30 or something like that, by the time you were back after lunch, your actually head was melted and you were useless in the afternoon. And so it was like, well, why would you bother coming back? Like, if you want to just tick a few things over, that's grand. Like, but you're not really going to get much done because your head's not in the right space. But in the law, we're very much focused on hourly billing and how do we get the money in. So therefore, there's this feeling of, well, if you were in court in the morning, well, then come back and bill 3 hours or 4 hours in the afternoon, without an appreciation of, yes, but you have put me on edge for 3-4 hours there. I need 3-4 hours to unwind and decompress from that. And so that was where I would sort of be empathetic to people. Say, look, don't be rushing back to the office. Building relationships with people generally came about by going for coffee afterwards and going for lunch, depending on the time, and having a chat about cases generally, or how that case ran, or things like that, or what cases are coming up in a relaxed environment. But we have all, and I say we're no different than a lot of firms. We're pushing people into that. Well, look, okay, but we've got this to do. We're busy, and in our line of work, we don't have any ability to increase the rates that we charge, because they're fixed by the taxing master and the County Court Rules Committee. So we're trying to find all the way of how to be more efficient within that. And we can be as guilty as other people of not seeing, well, actually, there's a better way of doing that. But we try to do it as much as possible. But I think there has to be a change. And I think, unfortunately, it's easy to have a dig at a lawyer for, the hourly rates are going up. But the reality is that the hourly rate has to reflect that, that if I'm spending 5 hours with you at court, I need 3 hours with afterwards, not at court, so I can relax. So I have to charge you for 8 hours actually, or I have to charge a higher rate for the 5 hours because I need to pay for my downtime. And I think that's the thing that people don't see. You look at professional footballers as a good example, maybe getting 100, 200, 500,000 a week. They're not working 24 hours a day. They're doing a couple of hours training. They're having good food and diet, and they're being motivated and they're being looked after. But they're not playing football 8 hours a day to then go out and play an hour and a half on a Saturday. That's not how it works. So it's kind of that thing of, there needs to be a whole reassessment of, well, how do we charge effectively for the value that we provide, in a system that's focused so much on hourly billing. It just doesn't make any sense.
It's not workable. No. And it seems quite archaic as well, doesn't it? It's that rigid, concept.
Yeah. Well, there's also this thing of partners. The allegations against partners is that they're just trying to exploit all the other workers and to make more money for themselves. And on the way in this morning, one of my things that I started in the last number of years to to help me unwind a little bit as I listen to Magic Radio, specifically Magic at the Musicals, where I can get the signal. And I was listening on the way in today to a song that always nearly makes me cry, actually. It's from Pocahontas, I think, Colours of the Wind.
I love it.
It's fabulous. And it's a fantastic line at the end about, you can own the earth and all you own is earth. Unless you're I think the line is, unless you're painting with all the colours of the wind. So basically, if you don't, if all you're obsessed about is making money, then it is of no value. Yeah. Because all the possessions don't mean anything without everybody around and the people. And I think that's kind of where, we've, I suppose in JMK, always had this view that we're okay. We may be running this big organisation, and it might be profitable, but the profits are there to keep the sustainability of it. It's not that we're robbing out the money every year, to go on holidays or buy yachts and things like. That's not. It's not what's happening. Is the business is there for the long haul, and it's slow and steady returns. It's not that we're trying to exploit anybody. I think that's the problem, where there becomes this idea that the partners have to exploit the people below them. Charge them out at high rates and get them to charge as many hours as possible without giving them the chance to relax and unwind. And the payoff is, well, in 15 years you can be like me. Well, that's what's happening. People are looking at and thinking, in 15 years I don't want to be you. Yeah.
Well, we looked at burnout culture as a term. And another kind of, I suppose, theme that we bring up on the podcast with our guests is around that work-life balance. And I know you've been interested in hearing what some of the guests have to say about that. But what do you think about that in terms of trying to kind of switch off or recharge from your work? And why is it important to have that kind of identity outside of work in the legal profession that some don't really do because they see it as a vocation, I guess? But
well, I think for me, this is about me, and I don't know if others are like me, but so if people comment and say, no, he's on his own on this, I'll know. But I think for me, I didn't understand the need to have hobbies and things outside of work, because my hobby was reading business books and legal thrillers and the like, and reading the legal press. Yeah. Because I was thinking, well, that's not my day job, therefore that's my hobby.
Okay.
But after 30 years in the legal profession, you realise that you're incredibly one-dimensional. You know nothing about anything other than your niche legal issue. And where this, I suppose, really has come to the fore in the last couple of years is I have a friend who's tried to encourage me to take up fishing. And so I've been standing about in rivers for the last couple of years, trying to spend the day unwinding. And I went on a trip with him, and in America, he's an American friend, and what happened, I was incredibly embarrassed the whole trip because Americans would ask me about fishing in Ireland and what kind of fish there was and where would be good for salmon, where would be good for this, that, was there not this kind of fish? And I think, I don't even know what you're talking about, and then what about the wildlife? What kind of birds is there in such and such? Do you have eagles? Do you have, such and such? What kind of, and I think, I literally have no idea. Honestly, no clue. I do not know anything about anything. Yeah. If you want to ask me about what legal strategy we should adapt, what do you call it, in a complicated car accident case, I'll tell you that. But you want to know about what's the best river to fish at outside Belfast? Not a clue, mate. Not a clue. So you realise over time that you become incredibly one-dimensional. But I thought that I realised that I have a very deep understanding of a narrow issue, and it's not very exciting. And outside of that, and that's kind of where you're at, is going, and you kind of feel, so people are looking at the outside thinking, God, look at what a great business that is, and look, they've got a fantastic reputation. And I'm thinking, yeah, but I don't know nothing about anything. What have I just done? I can't have a conversation with anybody because I'm only, I'm so focused on one thing. So I think that's where I have started to understand the need to have hobbies and understand what that actually is. There was a barrister that I had some dealings with years ago, a guy called Tim Kivan, who wrote a book called in partnership with another lady, called Why Lawyers Should Surf. And I do remember the lesson of that was about, that once, if you're up surfing, you cannot think about anything else. That if you do, if your mind wanders, you're going to fall off. And with the fishing, actually, it's something a little bit similar to that. Is that if you've cast out your fly and your mind drifts, you miss when the fish is going for the for the hook, and then you don't get him, and you're going,
so you
I
have
shouldn't
to
have
be
thought about
focused.
that.
Yeah.
But having that focus on something else, 100% focus on something else, is what allows you to decompress. And so, me reading legal thrillers or reading case law or reading, the legal press, even though I enjoyed reading it and I built up a lot of knowledge, it was still part of the same thing, the same work.
You've just reminded me, I must have been very one-dimensional and boring back when I was training, because my hobbies outside, because I did human rights and was obsessed with the work and really enjoyed it and loved it. But I used to go to so many talks and whatever was on I'd go to, and then my reading was all around, books and work that was related to my work. But again, I saw it as relaxing and outside of work, but I literally am thinking I didn't really do anything else, which is quite, something to think about. But that's a really good point and a really good analogy as well, and I hope you keep up that fishing and that fly
we're
fishing.
heading to America soon again for that, and I've been out probably about a dozen times this year, and I've even managed to get my daughter out.
No way.
So she works at JMK now, and she is working there long enough to have a 4-day week, so we've had a couple of Mondays out, and she's really enjoyed that. So making memories.
Making memories, hashtag. That's fantastic. And that's a lovely way to spend time as well. And it's quite relaxing. I mean,
well, it's amazing because I'm standing about these rivers, and the rivers that I maybe would have driven past every day or on a regular basis, never give them a second look. Yeah. And now I'm looking at the beauty of them and thinking, oh my God, that's fabulous. And I do sort of joke when I'm out that I really prefer not to catch anything, because I just like standing about in the water and throwing the line out and back in again.
Lovely. Out in nature. That's where, that in itself, just being out and about and outside is healthy.
But I think that's it. But that's part of what I was alluding to earlier about. It's like you don't even realise that you're changing and that you've become that way. Because having done karate and outdoor survival and kayaking in America 30 years ago, those are the sort of things that I could and should have kept up, but I didn't. They all went by the wayside, and thinking that I was relaxing because I wasn't reading the client's file was naive in hindsight.
Yeah.
But at the time, I thought that it was. So I didn't understand the need to do something that's required a lot of concentration, but has got nothing to do with the day job.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And a lot of our guests are heavily involved in athletic activities outside of work. We had so many on the do Ironman, marathon training, CrossFit and all of that. And you can really see why, it's that kind of switch off element that again allows them to recharge. And I suppose what they've said is that it makes them a better solicitor or barrister or whatever for their client ultimately. Just to kind of close things up a little bit, what would you say to a solicitor who right now might be feeling overwhelmed and isolated? And secondly, what could we do as an industry to make things better? I know that's a big question.
It's a big question. Well, I think firstly, in terms of how you make it better, the first thing is there has to be empathy. There has to be complete empathy from the top of the business down. And that is, and also a recognition that, that putting in the ability to have employee assistance program or helpline is not proper empathy. It's just, you're just ticking a box, and that we have to slow things down is a big part of it. We have to slow things down, and I suppose the thing is you have to do something. You can't do nothing. That's the problem, because it is. It's overwhelming for everybody in the business to try and figure out how to sort these things out, and any practice doesn't matter the size of it, because you've got the client pressures all the time, you've got the money problems all the time, you got to keep the bank happy, you got to keep the tax man happy, you got to keep your medical consultants happy in terms of paying their bills and things like that, and paying the court fees, and so everything needs to take over, but I think, unfortunately, in an environment where there's been no increase in fees for what we do for 7 or 8 years now, it is becoming increasingly harder. But it still has to be done. We have to. This is my Jerry Maguire moment. We have to make less money, to make, but make things better. I think that's kind of that. I think that's kind of the. There's one of those business gurus that we quote a lot in our business, Simon Sinek, and his book recently, "The Business is the Infinite Game," and I think that's kind of where I had a light bulb moment about that the other day, where we were working on a 3-year business plan, thinking that was a long-term plan, and not realizing that 3 years is nothing. No. It's just, but we think too short, and we need to be thinking in much greater time frames, and I think that's part of the issue. And same for the person who has the burnout and is approaching burnout, is to think that you're going to cure yourself by taking a week off isn't going to sort it out. It's absolutely not. But you do need to, if you're going to take that week out, then you take the week out to plan a long-term strategy. Yeah. That's the issue, and it's another cliche that's talked about is be kind to yourself. I think that's the issue. Is it just recognize it's a lifelong commitment to try and balance yourself and be better at managing stress and managing your commitments, and don't try to fix it all at once. I think that's been probably my focus, has always been on trying to fix it quick. Yeah. And that and my impatience has caused me a lot of problems, where I just would have been better to sit back and say, relax about that. So even when I talk about our disciplinary issue, and it took 10 years nearly, had I taken some of the lessons that other people tried to tell me, which is, look, it'll take as long as it takes, don't be, trust the process, you'll be all right in the end. And I think that's kind of where, if I had done that, I probably wouldn't have had as many depressed days over that time, because I would have said, okay, it's going to take as long as it takes, and that's fine, and just reconcile with that. And I think that's, but in the moment, it didn't matter how many times people told me that. Yeah. It didn't matter. I couldn't see that. No. Now afterwards, I can see, well, I wasted an awful lot of my energy on that, the relationships with various professionals and other colleagues and people in the profession have suffered as a result of that. But I couldn't help myself. I couldn't get out of my own my own mindset on that. And I think that's the issue. Is you've got to have the space to get comfortable with that, to understand these things. But I think fundamentally you've got to pull yourself back and say, what is it that I want to be? How do I want my life to look like? And accept that could be a 10-year situation, that isn't going to happen in 10 weeks. And if you can look at it over a longer period of time, then you can be more comfortable about making the slow improvements. And if you had 1 improvement a week, well, sure, over 10 years you'd have 500 improvements in your life, but something I always reference over the years is, if I say, like, if you give me 3 things to do today, I'll get the 3 of them done. If you give me 10 things to do, I'll do 0. And back to the profession and what the profession can do. I think that's where the owners of businesses and the people in charge of them need to be kinder to their staff and be more aware of these issues, and say, look, I'm going to give you piece by piece what you've got to do. I'm not going to give you everything, because if I give you 10 things, your mind will be that scrambled that you'll not be able to do anything properly. And I think that's kind of where we're all prone to giving the overwhelm. And I say what I said earlier is that the payback is supposed to be, oh, well, you'll do better in the future, but your life is now.
Yeah. Jonathan, thank you so much for sharing your personal experience as well and your insights. And I hope it helps open up this dialogue. I mean, we'll come back to it again on the podcast because it's really important. And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in. And if you're in the legal field or just interested in the topic, we'd love to hear your thoughts and your experiences in terms of how we can improve this across the board. So until next time, and as you say, take care of yourself and be kind to yourself.
Well, that's it. Absolutely. Yes. No, thank you very much, Sarah. I appreciate this opportunity because I know that it is important, and I suppose for me, what I'm thinking is, I don't want to be egotistical, but I think for me, what's important is that people know that, I suppose also that I'm open to having conversations about it. That that if someone wanted to talk about things or to get something off their head, off their that they could do it. I think that's another thing actually. Just to steal the last word. I do think that's something which I didn't recognise for a long time, is about writing things down. You got to write this stuff down. That's how it gets out of your head and makes it easier.
So important. Yeah. And thank you for offering that too. And you've been a great help to me, a fantastic leader for me. So, and I've been very fortunate to work here. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone for joining me today. If you like the show, please remember to share and leave a review if you have a moment. And you can also check out our website, www.activistlawyer.com, where you will see some blog articles written by our guests and contributors, as well as some fabulous Activist Lawyer merchandise.
This podcast was recorded in Granite Podcast Studio. Interested in starting up your own podcast but don't know how? Granite Podcast Studio can help. Record your podcast in our state-of-the-art studio, which is based in the heart of Newry City. Our studio has cutting-edge and user-friendly technology and can seat up to 4 people. We also provide an editing service for our team, using your guidance and editing notes to provide you with a flawless finished product, leaving your listeners wanting more. For more information on how you can get started, visit www.granitepodcaststudio.com.